Axios calls this guy the FCC's 5G crusader. He has led the FCC's work to modernize the infrastructure rules and accelerate the build-out of high-speed networks. His reforms have cut billions of dollars in red tape and enabled the private sector to build these high-speed networks in communities all across the country and extend America's global leadership in 5G. Unfortunately, I don't think there's a lot of people in Washington, at least with this administration, that want to see America win the 5G race. That's a topic for another broadcast. His name is Brendan Carr, and he is an FCC commissioner. And we need good commissioners on the FCC. Ajit Pai has left. Brendan, how are you?
I'm doing great. Really good to join you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. You are suggesting something, and I think this, I don't know if it started with you or who it started with. I know that Marco Rubio has been talking about restoring the internet to Cuba. And there is a way we can do this, but it requires the government and Google to participate, correct?
Yeah, some of that is right. So, look, in Cuba, we're seeing unprecedented protests. And what we see around the globe now is the first thing people do when they take to the street to fight for liberty is they take out their smartphone. They take pictures, they take video. Because the thing that brutal dictatorships like least is the attention of the world.
Correct.
The spotlight on their brutality. So we've seen this in Iran. We've seen it in Venezuela. We've seen it in Myanmar. So the first thing that people do is they take their phone out. The first thing the dictators do is they shut down the internet. Now, they don't cut the internet entirely because that would cut off their own communications. They block access to WhatsApp and Facebook and messaging services so those pictures and videos can't get out there. So what I said, what others have said, like you mentioned, Senator Rubio, Governor DeSantis, is we should look for ways to restore internet services to Cuba, which would help to accelerate the ultimate destination of the brutal Cuban regime, which is its end. And there's two ways we can do it. We can introduce new services, new internet services from off-island. That can take some time, and there's some logistical challenges to be sure, but we have the technical capacity to do that. And track two is we should bolster support for circumvention tools so that people can continue to use the internet services on the island and just get around the filtering, which, by the way, the filtering has all the digital fingerprints of the communist regime of China. So they are very much involved in helping Cuba shut down internet services.
And it didn't Facebook and everybody else, they did this in Egypt. They did this for the Arab Spring. They actually helped foment that revolution and made sure that people knew how to use it and gain access to it. Now it doesn't seem, have you heard of any high-tech, the big high-tech, are any of them saying we got to join in and help these people?
It's been pretty quiet from what I've seen. Former Secretary Pompeo sent out a tweet a week or so ago saying that the government and others went in Iran and helped bolster internet services during the protests there. We have the technical capacity to do it, and it's simply a question of, do we have the political will at the highest levels of this administration to green light these efforts? If we do that, American enterprises can deliver these solutions to the Cuban people and show our support for them. And President Biden initially came out with some positive words. We're going to look at this, but it's over 2 weeks, and we haven't seen any action at this point. And, I'm very concerned that we're not going to see action. So, this is just a question of political will. It's not a question of
can we do
capacity.
it? Yeah. And is Project Loon, which was a Google project, I believe, in Kenya, which sends this tennis court sized tower up over the country, way above where airplanes are flying, and it just kind of hovers there and kind of acts as a receiver to pass that message along. Easily, we could probably do it with 2 of these things because Florida is so close. Do I have that right?
You're exactly right. So this is what I call that track 1 idea, which is how do we introduce new services into Cuba from off island. And there's a variety of technological ways you can do it, and you put your finger on one of them. Google Loon had this operation where they put up stratospheric balloons. These go 60 to 75,000 feet above the air. You can actually keep them relatively static over a geographic area, given the way that the winds circulate at those levels. I've been to Kenya myself to see this technology in action. It works. We at the FCC authorized this technology in 2017 after a hurricane wiped out communications in Puerto Rico. 7 to 8 of these balloons went up, circled around Puerto Rico, and helped beam services into that community. And we saw it in Peru after some natural disasters. These balloons went up. There's other technologies. We could beam Wi-Fi off of the U.S. Embassy in Havana. Previously, we had inserted satellite-powered internet devices into Cuba. The advantage of these high-altitude balloons, as you point out, is you can stay in international airspace and beam directly from the balloon to a handset, back from the handset to the balloon. And to your point, given the geographic distance to Marathon or the Keys, you can beam right from the balloon back to the internet in the U.S. So that's the advantage of the balloon. And frankly, we need it now in Cuba, but we also need this, I think, as a strategic capability for this country. We've always had, Radio Free Asia, Radio Marti that broadcast into Cuba. The modern day equivalent of broadcasting information into countries that aren't free is to enable the free, unfiltered use of the internet in those countries. So I think we need this as a long-term strategic capability as well. It's a lot better than obviously putting troops on the ground as well.
Sure. And it's, with the way things are going, quite honestly, we might need one for, suppression here in America. What is being done is craziness. This
is amazing. I mean, look, we cannot be speaking out of both sides of our mouth. At the one point, we're saying brutal regimes like Cuba, you can't filter, you can't censor the internet. At the same time that we have this White House, Jen Psaki, out there saying, oh, yeah, we've been coordinating with big tech to censor American speech. We can't do that. We need to be very clear that we believe in a free, open, uncensored internet for our own American people here and for other people abroad. And so I think we should go forward, and whether it's through legislation or otherwise, make very clear that government officials should not be calling up big tech companies and asking them to put a thumb on the scale against speech they don't like. Because let's get real. It's not about misinformation. It's not about disinformation. It's about political speech that doesn't fit the narrative of the people that are bombing in with these phone calls.
Is it possible to privately do this? I mean, we can just this audience, and that's not involving the Cuban population in America. We could fund that privately. I doubt Google would take our check, but is there a way to do this privately?
Well, on the Track 1 stuff, so Google shuttered Loon at the beginning of the year because it wasn't a great commercial product. People weren't going to drop, Verizon or AT&T for these balloon services. But I think as a strategic capability for the country, the commercial viability is less of a concern. But the Track 2 stuff we talked about, which is the circumvention tools, there's a lot of open source applications out there that the Cuban people are using right now. Those technologies need additional funding. And we're not talking, billions of dollars. We're talking $1 to $3 to $6 million. So there are some efforts underway to try to use private sector funding to bolster these technologies. I can't endorse any one particular, company or direct people towards those crowdfunding sites, given, limits on me as a government official. But there are private sector ways that people could donate money so that these circumvention tools continue to work and the people of Cuba can continue to get those pictures and videos out to the world.